Well, I have very similar feelings about Women's History Month that I have about Black History Month, and that is that women make history every day. So whether it's, and I think I mean that in small, mundane ways, and then just in the big everyday things. So I think what it means is that people are, women in particular, but Black people, Black women, are living their lives to the fullest. They're being self-determining. They are exercising their full rights and citizenship in every way possible. They're able to do what they need to do for themselves, for their families, for their communities. They're taking risks. They're pushing boundaries. They're enjoying themselves. They're feeling happy. And I think in all of those ways we make history, because when we're able to do those things, we're able to change, change things that need to be changed, but also to bring joy to the people around us, and then bring joy to ourselves. And I think that's how we make history.
Women's history should be celebrated year-round, but Women's History Month is an opportunity for us to gather the focus of the people and the communities of people who don't necessarily honor women in the way that we should, particularly in this country, but definitely in the world. So Women's History Month is an opportunity, like I said, to gather people's focus and have people come together and celebrate women in the way that they should be celebrated throughout the year. It's an opportunity for us to honor the women who are in our lives and think about how women have changed things and contributed and supported, and the overwhelming importance of women to our well-being as human beings.
Celebrate women's history because, like any sort of marginalized group, it gets written out of history as a whole. It's his story. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of people who want to believe that we have come so far and everything is integrated, and yet women still make less than men doing the same job. And yet women leaders are still questioned. One thing that I've been talking to certain people about is that if there's, say, a man and a woman standing next to each other in an office, people are going to address the man first, even if he's the secretary and not the boss, and even if he's, you know what I mean? So it's like those little things that happen, people discount and discredit because it doesn't seem like such a grand oppression, but those little like microaggressions add up, and they're serious, and we live them every day. So I think that is really important to uplift women's history and women's contributions to every social justice movement, because there hasn't been one that we haven't been a part of.
I think that's a really challenging question, because when we think about history, it is so often the straight white man's narrative and the Eurocentric narrative of what history is. And the victors are the ones who write history, so clearly those in power in our society are the ones who control that narrative. And we're at a point, I think, where talking about Black history or Asian history or Native history is gaining importance, but sometimes it can really be challenging to think about women's history, because women have always been integrated into every society, but have been in the background or have been silenced. So it can be hard to even find and tease out, well, what were the roles, or what were the accomplishments, or how did women contribute? And it's about really thinking about all of our history and remembering that women have always been there and have always been a part of each step along the way.
Well, equality in the workforce, would be about that we are, again, this goes back to the self-determination, but that we're able to, do work that brings us joy, that brings us the resources that we need to do what we need to do. where we're respected, and that we're able to bring our full gifts, and that's all valued on the table. And so that's what, in a nutshell, that's what equality would mean to me. And that we recognize that we're able, that moment has been made possible by a lot of people who have come before us.
In the workforce, hands down, and when we think about sexism, so many people think sexism is no longer an issue, that we live in a post-feminist society, but looking at the workforce is one very easy way to understand, I think, that sexism is alive and kicking. When it comes to unequal pay, the work of women is simply not valued to the same extent and not rewarded to the same extent. When you look at the glass ceiling, that's real. And there are ways in which most professional environments are still a good old boys club that socially excludes women from being part of the conversation, and from being an insider when it comes to making the important decisions. And the culture of workforces tend to privilege masculinity, and so it becomes really complicated for women because you're in a catch-22. If you tend to be a feminine woman, that is seen as not being powerful or not being intelligent and not fitting into that culture, but masculine women are also marginalized and deemed as deviant somehow or not the norm. And there are always those stereotypes or judgments placed upon them as being a bitch or power hungry or whatever it may be. So no matter how you present and approach things, you're stuck. You're stuck, basically, in that culture.
The phrase equality in the workplace, I immediately think of how we are defining equality. Because people have multiple definitions. And in some people's eyes, equality, they could say, oh, we have equality in the workplace now. What else do we need to change? So I want to think about how we are defining, as a community of individuals, how we define the word equality, what that actually means. What is the difference between equality and equity? What do women in the workplace actually require? What do they offer? How are our needs different? I don't think that men and women need the exact same thing all the time. Sometimes we do, but other times we need to honor the fact that we are different human beings and we work in different ways. So how are we specifically looking at women and everything that they have to offer and everything that they bring, and how are we catering to them in a way that is honoring and with the same respect as men?
A lot of times I've been younger than a lot of the people I was working with or even working over. So that's been an issue for people, as well as a lot of times being the only woman working in HIV prevention. So for me, for people to take me seriously and know that I know what I'm talking about has been a struggle, definitely.
When I think of that, I think of the women in my family, actually. I think of my mother. I think of my sisters. I think of every Saturday going to the beauty shop. I think of women who are afraid to get out of bed in the morning because of the way their hair looks. I think of the real fear that they experience because of what they see in the media and what they see in the mirror. I think of a real thing. I think that sometimes people think of images in the media as, this superficial thing that we deal with, but it doesn't really affect us. But it leads to depression. It leads to self-hate. So I think of the women who are very influential to me. But, women come in all shapes and sizes. And I think it comes from, it's a colonizing ideology that all women have to look the same way, and they have to be this size, and they have to speak this way, and speak this language, and have this kind of hair, and this color skin. But beauty is what we create every day. Beauty is not something that is predefined by anyone other than yourself. Beauty is what you say to yourself when you wake up, when you get dressed, when you walk, when you talk, when you learn. Beauty is how you love other people who look like you and who don't look like you. So when I think of images in the media, I think of all the ways that I want to deconstruct that. I think of my nieces and how I want to teach them to define their own beauty.
I mean, visibility is so important. Our faces have to be out there in the media, in the movies, in the magazines, wherever it may be. And also within our personal lives, we have to value realness and authentic beauty and the diverse ways in which women can be beautiful, because so often within communities of women, we ourselves are the ones who are putting down other people, and who are making sizist comments, who are not accepting that beauty can come in many different forms. And so we become the gatekeepers of that form of sexism.
I think for me, the circles that I'm in tend to be less focused on like a standard American commercialized sense of beauty. But there also is, I think, another set, even in like the natural community, where there still is a certain standard, although we're trying to like break out of the box. It's kind of like, as my locks are growing, I'm getting more compliments, and like light skin curly hair is like, oh, that's a cute fro, but if you're dark skin with a fro, make sure it looks on point. You know what I mean? So it's like, definitely, even though we're trying to kind of create a new, not new at all actually, create a different space for us to be natural and be who we are, it still has sort of a hierarchy, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, well, so this is big, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, all of these images, I think, they're largely what we understand to be beauty in the mainstream media, in the capitalist, imperialist context. It's really constructed toward a particular means, and that's for profit. And so we're asked to buy into all that. I think that our liberation is in understanding that, and then being able to resist that by recognizing that beauty looks many different ways to many different people. So again, this is a construction, you know, this term masculine, you know, what is that about? You know, are we talking about one's ability to be strong, one's ability to lift? Everybody has that ability. And so the label that we give masculine, again, that comes with some sort of construction that we're supposed to buy into. Some people have access to that meaning and others don't. We always have to interrogate that, always.
Well, for one thing, I think it's important to remember that all women who identify as women are still sharing that common identity and relationship, but also all of the marginalization that comes with it. I think it's important to remember that no matter how a woman presents her sex, the issues of sexism don't disappear for her. I think that feminine and masculine women can experience gender in specific different ways, however. And I think this relates to some of what I was speaking to around the workforce. Masculine identified women may experience a certain type of marginalization because they are a very invisible community in many ways. That's not a way of presenting that I think is very mainstream or represented often. And I think that comes with its own prejudices, and also being read or seen as gay or lesbian and not being able to pass comes with a certain prejudice or even lack of safety. I think, though, that femininity in our society, whether it's attached to a woman's body or a man's body, is seen as the less powerful. So, like, femophobia is something that people don't really talk about, but no matter who it is that is expressing femininity, they're seen as the weaker, the less powerful, the less intelligent. And so when it comes to a woman, with a woman, identified woman, who is feminine, even though she may pass as straight and have a certain privilege from that experience, or is seen as, oh, this is how a woman is supposed to be, what a woman is supposed to be in our society is nothing good. It is seen as the lowest of the low. So there's so much baggage that comes with that. And though masculinity comes with a certain amount of safety because it's outside of the norm, femininity as a norm, even like women who are feminine are living in a constant lack of safety.
I think that a lot of times women will be like, I'm not that feminine, I'm tough. Or I'm not that feminine, I'm this, I'm that. But there is no pre-definition of what feminine is. You can put on your lipstick and your high heels and tell everybody what the business is. Or you can put on your basketball sneakers and tie your hair up and still be feminine. There is no pre-definition. Women, we have allowed other people to define our well-being for too long. It is time that we decide what we are for ourselves and no one else. And then love it, love it, love it.
Well, one thing I was thinking was the natural hair community and how they have these like natural hair meetups, and like even on Twitter, like Twitter's where I experienced the most straight women in my life, and they're amazing, and they're like moms, and they're like organic foodies and breastfeeding activists, and they're awesome. But I think like things like that where it's kind of out of the box is where people are really receptive, and I don't think that's understood. I don't think people view straight women, especially straight black women and lesbian black women, as having anything in common or interacting at all. I feel like it's like two islands, and it's really not.
Mm-hmm. So, again, some of these meanings, there's nothing inherently wrong with being who we are, whatever we are. Our work is how we make meaning of them. And so I think that, first of all, that's a very beautiful interaction. And we should celebrate that interaction. That's beautiful. And so I think what we have to do is recognize how we're being pitted against each other by these larger meanings and these larger systems that create those meanings. So LGBTQ identified women and heterosexual women, that's a very beautiful interaction.
I think that I feel fairly comfortable with interacting with heterosexual or straight women. I think that I share a connection to all women, no matter how they identify in terms of sexual orientation or even what their experience around transition or cis identity may be. It's clearly difficult when straight women are not aware of their privilege around sexual orientation. And also I find that within straight women communities, there are much more assumptions that are made about presentation, desired presentation around beauty. I think that queer women's spaces allow for, there's still complications, but there's more of a spectrum allowed for ways of presenting and also ways of being in relationships and ways of being sexual and ways of relating to issues of power and presentation. So it's hard that in straight female communities, all of the kind of straight scripts come along with that typically.
Women can be tricky. Women can be tricky because we are told to hate each other. We're told to deconstruct each other, to tear each other apart. She don't look right. She ain't got this right. Her hair, her nails, her skull, her teeth, her this, her that. She can't write poetry. She can't sing, and her butt's flat. So women will go top to bottom to hate another woman. And I don't think that's just heterosexual females. I think that's anybody. But we need to stop and think about why we're doing this. Why do we throw so much shade on each other? What is the fear with your assistant next to you? Particularly with heterosexual women, I think it's a lot about men. and the hunger for men, and well, he likes her, so, or he likes me, that's my man, this is that. You need to do your own thing. You need to not worry about what anybody else is doing. You are most beautiful when you know that you're beautiful, when you know that the sister next to you is beautiful in a different way, and that's okay. I think that a lot of women would be a lot happier if we stopped dogging each other and just focused on my goals. I don't have time to be worried about you, your natural hair, relaxed hair, lace front, booty, breasts, hips, thighs, whatever. I don't have time to worry about you. I have young people that need my help. I have a world that's falling apart. I have a God who needs to hear from me. I have a family who loves me. Like, I don't have time. And I think a lot more women need to get their priorities straight.
Yeah, I think I'm really inspired by, our radical activists who have always said that, my liberation is bound up with your liberation. And so I would really like for these mainstream groups to understand that nobody's free until we're all free, and that we all have to kind of understand, what our privileges are, whether or not we have earned them, that all of that is we need to be conscious of that at all times, and be willing to understand that we all have that collective responsibility to work together to make the world kind of a better place and a more just place. And so that means that when the conversation gets difficult or the work gets hard, that you don't get up and leave the conversation. You don't get up and you don't leave the table when you understand that your privilege is part of the problem. So part of being, part of giving love, part of it being all about the love is being able to, to be willing to do that. And be willing to recognize that you may lose something in that. You may lose a little power.
I see sisterhood as the genuine, loving, and accepting relationship between women. It is the bond that brings women together, and it can be so challenging because we come from such different experiences. We come from such different identities and cultures, and all of those layers of racism and homophobia and all of those other things can enter into spaces of women. But we also have a shared identity and a shared experience that is important and that is powerful. And personally, I find that I connect very well with women, and I appreciate that the ways in which women are often socialized to be, in terms of being relationship-oriented and empathetic and things like that, which our society doesn't necessarily value, but which women are socialized often to have as qualities, are things that I really enjoy in spaces. And in my relationships with other people, whether they're men or women. I think, though, that sisterhood can be very difficult because, like I said before, women are often the gatekeepers of sexism because we are so put down in our society. We're crawling to have a place. We're crawling and grasping at some form of power and legitimacy within this world, and often what that means is pushing other women down. So finding that genuine support among women can sometimes be really difficult.
Sisterhood means not having to explain myself. I think there's only as many conferences, as many events as there are, there's only those very few where it's I'm bringing my full self through this door and I don't have to explain any part of that.
Sisterhood wasn't always perfect for us because, we fight and we wear each other's clothes and we steal this and steal that and who's boyfriend and what's going on. But sisterhood means always being there in a very serious way to me. It means that no matter what, my sister is my sister, and we are connected. Mi mati. Mati meaning shipmate, but mati was a word that slaves used as a term of affection between each other. Mi mati, mi sister, my shipmate, the one who goes through life with me. Sisterhood isn't about beauty to me. Sisterhood isn't about, oh, we're going here to get our nails done and this and that. Although self-care is important, absolutely, but sisterhood is about when I need to break down, when I don't have anything else to give, where can I go? And I hope it's on my sister's shoulder. I hope it's in my sister's hand. I hope it's in her house, on her living room. I hope she's on the phone, on the Skype call. Sisterhood is about a fierce sense of support. And knowing that we, as sisters, deal with something different than anyone else. Being a person of color and a woman and whatever else our identities are, we have a different walk. We have a different path. And it seems like a lot of times only we can understand the real nuance every day of waking up and living in this body and leading these lives. So like I said, sisterhood is about a fierce sense of support and undying love for someone who goes through the same things that you go through.
I personally, when I think of the movement, it is an overarching move and thrust towards social justice and equality and visibility and safety for all people. And each one of those movements is deeply important to me. The LGBTQ movement, the feminist movement, movements of various people of color and immigrants. And I think that it can be hard to have multiple marginalized identities, and as a Black queer woman, we can often feel like, oh, we have this whole list on us in every single way. We're on the bottom, and dealing with that triple burden or even more layers of marginalization for some women can be really, really difficult, but I think that perspective is so critical. And so even when it's challenging that in each space, in the LGBTQ movement, it's typically gay white men who are controlling the narrative. So it can be hard to be a woman in that space. It can be hard to be a person of color in that space. In the feminist movement, it's typically white middle-class women. So to be a woman of color or a lesbian or dyke or whatever it may be can be challenging. In each one of these spaces, having those other identities and bringing that to the table can be really challenging, because you can end up feeling like you are a spokesperson everywhere you go. But even with that challenge, I have to remind myself that my existence, in a way, in this world, in a world that is so deeply violent and hateful and unequal, that my existence and my visibility is radical. And the fact that I identify as a woman and a feminist, as a Black person, as an African immigrant, as a Muslim, and speaking those truths consistently and loudly, even when it hurts, even when I'm frustrated that I have to be the teacher every single day at every table that I come to, being there, it is powerful. And being there is radical. And I think that is my place in the movement.
My place is a revolutionary who is all about the love, and just bringing love to my interactions with everybody, and uplifting that love, and being a model for that love. That's my place.
I feel like every day I'm contributing to the movement. Survival is resistance. Is that Audre Lorde? I think so. But that's true. No matter who said it, that's true. And it's something that's in our spirit. Survival is resistance. Every day that I am, teaching in my classrooms, or that I'm sitting in a classroom at the university, or I'm on the train or doing whatever, I am resisting the systems of oppression who want to get rid of me, or who want to keep me in the bottom, keep me thinking that I don't look right, don't talk right, don't see right, don't learn right, don't eat right. So the movement is every day. The movement is waking up. The movement is going to sleep. The movement is loving my brothers and my sisters. And my place in that movement is always changing, because I'm always growing and I'm always learning. A few years ago, I was at a different place in the movement. I was angry. I cut all my hair off. I couldn't deal with it, couldn't talk to this person, couldn't read this kind of book. I was telling everybody about everything. And now that's changing, because I'm growing and I'm learning and I'm loving. Self-care is part of the movement. Self-care is part of the movement, y'all. Taking care of yourself, loving yourself viciously, fiercely, unapologetically. All of these things are important, but for me, my passion is the young people. So my place in the movement is showing young people that there is a movement happening. There is a wind that is blowing, and they need to get up, rise up, and be a part of it. And so my place in the movement is finding young people and getting them involved and asking them what their place is.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think there are many different ways to answer that question. I think there are many different levels, I think that in some ways we've made some great progress in terms of representation. But that can be also interpreted as like surface level, because the structures that uphold the very, that inhibits progress are still in place. And so you may change the face of something, but it doesn't mean that the underlying structures have shifted. That is our work, that we're not duped by the face. And so I feel like whether we're talking about women's progress, Black progress, queer, LGBTQI progress, we have to, I think, be vigilant to always look at the underlying structures. Have those structures shifted at all in our struggle? And I feel like that's the question that we're always left with. So, of course, there's been progress, sure, we'd be disingenuous if we didn't recognize that there has been progress, there's been change. But the questions are deeper, and we always have to be willing to go deeper.
Everyone has multiple identities, and everyone has different access to privilege and oppression. But I think that women of color in particularly are oppressed in so many ways because of so many things. Every day is a fight for most women of color. And a lot of times it is a silent fight, because for a long time women of color have been invisible. And so we were not given access to a language to articulate our oppressions, to articulate our experiences, to learn how to communicate those experiences with one another. A lot of things were built on the backs of women of color. We are used for our appearance, for our sexual economy, for our cooking, for our language, for our body shape, for our hair. We are pulled apart by society. And it is not until recently that people have really cared about the well-being of women of color. Other women of color have been writing about this and teaching about this for decades. But people are just starting to come around and say, oh, maybe that's a thing. Black feminism is just starting to blossom in a way that's different from white feminism, which does not apply. I think that we're not just fighting one fight. I think that Black men fight their fight, but we are fighting being a person of color, being a woman, being dark skin or light skin or whatever else it is. And I don't think that there's any other community of individuals who deal with the multiple levels of oppression that we deal with.
To follow her gut, to stand up for herself when it's the wrong thing to do, when people seem like they're on your side, push them more. When people seem like they're advocating for you, push them more, because no one's going to advocate for you like you will. Yeah.
Wow. That's deep. I think I would say that I think I would tell her that she is absolutely acceptable as she is. And that is true in that moment, and that will always be true, and that part of the love, that part of our purpose and our struggle will always be to remember that in the face of what she will be confronted with, the messages, the meanings, and that expect that will be a fight. And at times it will be a wonderful, beautiful fight with lots of joy and happiness around it, and other times it'll be painful. And the lessons will be hard to accept. But it's all, it's the holistic, it's the humanity that is part of being acceptable, you being acceptable as you are. That is your humanity, that is your right, and that will be your liberation.
I think that is such a challenging question, because turning to my younger self, a part of me wants her to relax and to relax into all that she is, the masculinity and the femininity, the sexuality or the lack thereof. And to simply accept herself and be true to that self. But it's so hard to imagine saying those words to this young woman, because a part of me also wants to warn her, because holding on to who you are around presentation, around the choices you make, the sexual choices you make, the professional choices you make, no matter what you do, there are challenges along that road because you are a woman. And I want to tell myself to be strong through those coming challenges, that there will be moments when it feels like it's too much, but to persevere through them. And it's hard. I think it's really hard to think about speaking to a younger version of myself, because I don't feel that I yet have all the answers. I'm still very much growing and learning and traveling this journey and trying to figure out how I remain true to myself and be my most authentic self in a world that is so scary at times.
Take your time. I would tell my 16-year-old self to take her time, because 16 is a fast year. And you want to grow up and do and be everything all at once. But I would tell my 16-year-old self to take her time, because being patient with yourself is loving yourself. And that's important. I would tell her that the lyrics to one of me and my mom's favorite songs. by Tuck and Patty, which is a very old group. But the lyric is, "Don't be afraid. Love is waiting for you at the end of almost any road that you choose." And that's so true, because at 16, you want to be loved. You want people to like you. You want to be beautiful. You want all of this. But don't be afraid, Amber Rose. Love will come, and it will be worth the wait, and you will get there.
Is we have to create a world where all the tribes are welcome. And so that has always stuck out to me. And I feel like that is our purpose, in our struggles. And how we define what that means, that's an evolving conversation. It's going to change from generation to generation or whatever. But how do we create a world where all the tribes are welcome? My name is Trina Jackson, and you are watching HBGC Presents Ladies First.
My name is Amber Rose, and you are now watching HBGC Presents Ladies First.
Hi, I'm Denisha Yancey, and you're watching HBGC Presents Ladies First.
Hi, my name is Camille Mohammed, and you are watching HBGC Presents Ladies First.